You are standing in the open. No walls, no fabric, no judgment. It is 170,000 years ago, and nobody on Earth is ashamed of their body. Nobody, not one human. Then something shifts. Not the weather, something inside. And the first piece of clothing ever worn was not made because a human was cold. It was made because a human was seen. By the end of this video, your understanding of shame and why it still controls you every single day will be permanently changed. Here is what every school textbook tells you. Humans started wearing clothes because the Ice Age came. Temperatures dropped. Bodies needed protection. Clothing was a practical invention, like fire or stone tools. Logical, clean, completely wrong. If cold weather drove clothing, the timeline doesn't hold. We have genetic evidence from body lice of all things that humans began wearing clothes approximately 170,000 years ago. The last major ice age didn't grip the planet until around 115,000 years ago. That is a 55,000-year gap. Humans were covering their bodies long before they needed to survive the cold, which means the real reason was never about temperature. It was always about something far more uncomfortable than cold. It was about being looked at. In a cave on the southern tip of Africa, archaeologists found something that rewrote the origin of the human mind. Blombos Cave, located in the Western Cape of South Africa, contained ochre pigment engraved with geometric patterns, perforated shell beads used as personal ornaments, and deliberate markings that served no survival function whatsoever. These artifacts date back roughly 100,000 years. They were not tools. They were statements. They said, "I exist. I am distinct. I can be seen." Dr. Francesco De Rico, archaeologist at the University of Bordeaux and one of the leading researchers on the origins of symbolic behavior, has argued that these objects represent the first confirmed evidence of a human mind capable of abstract self-representation. In simple terms, Blombos Cave is the first place on Earth where a human looked at themselves and thought, "How do I appear to others?" That question, "How do I appear?" is the psychological engine behind every piece of clothing ever worn. It was not warmth they were chasing. It was control. Control over how they were perceived. The moment a human wanted to manage their image, clothing became inevitable. Now here is where this stops being just an African story. The same symbolic behavior, body decoration, self-covering, the deliberate shaping of personal appearance appears across every inhabited continent within a strikingly close time window. Cave sites in Morocco, ochre burials in Australia, shell ornaments in the Levant. Neanderthals in Spain, a separate species entirely, were also piercing shells and wearing pigment on their skin at least 115,000 years ago. Think about what that means. Two different human species on opposite ends of the Earth, with no contact, no shared language, no trade route, both independently decided that the body needed to be decorated, covered, and managed. That is not coincidence. That is wiring. So ask yourself this. If clothing was just a practical response to cold, why did every culture on every continent, including those living in warm climates, make covering the body a sacred, rule-bound, deeply emotional act? Why did every ancient civilization attach shame, punishment, and spiritual meaning to the moment of exposure? This was never about weather. Something much deeper was being protected. And whatever it was, you are still protecting it right now. But here is what nobody in this conversation ever says out loud. And this part changes everything. Clothing was not invented to protect the body from the world. It was invented to protect the self from other people's eyes. The first garment was not a shield against cold. It was a shield against judgment. And that tells us something terrifying about the human brain. If shame is old enough to have built the first piece of clothing, what happens to a brain that never learned how to turn it off? Modern neuroscience has been quietly answering that question for decades, and what the research shows should genuinely concern you. Dr. June Price Tangney, psychologist and professor at George Mason University, has spent over 30 years studying the neurological and behavioral effects of shame. Her research distinguishes between guilt, which focuses on a specific action, and shame, which attacks the entire self. Shame does not say, "I did something bad," it says, "I am something bad." Brain imaging studies confirm that the experience of shame activates the same neural threat response as physical danger. The amygdala fires, cortisol spikes, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thought, goes partially offline. Your brain, in that moment, cannot distinguish between a predator in the dark and a room full of people looking at you. To your nervous system, being exposed feels identical to being attacked. Research across multiple clinical studies shows that chronic, unprocessed shame correlates with anxiety disorders, social withdrawal, and compulsive self-concealment behavior in over 70% of affected individuals. Your ancient brain is still scanning every room for the moment someone sees too much. In a prehistoric tribe of 50 to 150 people, shame served an exact function. If you violated a social boundary, if you exposed what should be hidden, took what wasn't yours, or behaved in a way that threatened group cohesion, shame was the correction mechanism. It was fast, it was physical, it hurt, and it was supposed to hurt because the alternative was exile. And exile in the Paleolithic was not embarrassment. It was death. You could not survive alone. The tribe was your immune system, your food supply, and your protection. Shame kept you inside the circle. The problem is that the circle no longer exists the way it once did. You are no longer being watched by 150 people who will decide whether you live or die. But your brain doesn't know that. It is still running the exile calculation every time you speak in public, post something online, or say what you actually think in a room full of people. The same neurological system that once protected your ancestor from being cast out of the tribe is now quietly preventing you from being seen at all. Shame was a survival tool. Over time, for many people, it became a gage. You have felt this. You know exactly what this feels like. That sudden heat in your face when you said the wrong thing in a group. That 3 a.m. moment when you replay something you did years ago. That pause before you post something the second where you ask yourself, is this too much? Will this be judged? Should I delete this? You deleted it, didn't you? That is not anxiety. That is not low self-esteem. That is 170,000 years of tribal survival code running inside a modern brain that was never updated for an audience of thousands. We were not built to be seen by the internet. We were built for a tribe of 150 people who knew our name, our history, our context. Every time you shrink yourself in public, every time you hide an opinion, water down a thought, or disappear from a conversation, that is your prehistoric brain doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect you from exile. We were built for belonging, not performance. And somewhere, underneath all of the covering up the clothing, the filters, the careful words, there is still a human who just wants to be seen without being judged for it. That impulse is not modern. It is ancient. It is the oldest feeling our species carries. Here is the answer to the question we left open. A brain that never learns to regulate shame does not go quiet. It goes underground. It starts making decisions for you: what to say, what to hide, how small to stay without ever asking your permission. Chronic shame is a brain permanently locked in exile mode, permanently scanning, permanently covering. You are not broken. You are prehistoric. Your shame response is not a flaw in your character. It is ancient code written for a world that no longer exists. So here is your challenge for today. Just one. The next time you feel that heat, that urge to cover, to delete, to shrink, stop for 3 seconds and ask yourself one question. Is this actual tribe judgment? Or is it just the internet pretending to be one? You already know the answer. You just needed 170,000 years of evidence to trust it.